This is Danny Dyer, actor, presenter, documentary maker. Dyer's been at the heart of some of the most memorable screen portrayals of working class life in post-Thatcher Britain. His on-screen persona puts him squarely in the long-standing tradition of the blokes, lads and geezers who fight, drink and swear their way through life. From the dreamers of the 50s and 60s kitchen sink dramas to football thugs and pill-popping ravers, these fellas have been at the heart of some of the most memorable films and TV we've ever clapped eyes on. Along the way, how they've been portrayed has reflected the joy and despair of British society as a whole. So let's see how working class masculinity has changed on screen over the years. Working class characters were a fixture of popular English literature for centuries, but the image of working class men, which endures to this day, was born out of post-war frustration. After the Second World War, traditional industries like shipping, coal mining and manufacturing went into decline, and the working class communities built around them began to erode. It was no longer assumed young men would follow in the footsteps of their dads and granddads. Working class masculinity had an identity crisis. On film, this manifested in what became known as kitchen sink dramas, so called because of their realistic depiction of drab lives and subject matters, and of course, their domestic settings.
You lot!
Films like Look Back in Anger, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, and The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner struck a nerve. These three, all produced by Woodfall Films, told stories of disaffected young men whose ambitions in the new Britain are thwarted by rigid social structures. In Look Back in Anger, Richard Burton's Jimmy Porter is angry at what he perceives to be the false promise of this new world.
I don't know, there are so many things that you could do.
Such as being a literary gent, Porter the Lion of the Pen Club, Laughing Porter the TV panellist, Lord Porter leaving number 10.
He holds his upper middle class wife in contempt and rails against the drudgery of routine and his inability to climb the ladder, despite being educated beyond his working class roots. Jimmy's anger, as unpleasantly as it's expressed, reflects a real frustration felt at the time. Many, like Jimmy, felt education reforms, the new welfare state and new industries had done little to deliver prosperity. The film shocked audiences, but proved there was an appetite for the kind of gritty realism writer John Osborne and those of his generation employed, in contrast to the escapism favoured by previous writers. These films took the foibles and frustrations of these imperfect, unlikable and frustrating characters seriously, and they did a lot to help birth the next iteration of the working class hard man, the anti-hero.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off!
When Britain began to swing in the 60s, Michael Caine lent a touch of glamour to the working class anti-hero in films like Alfie, The Italian Job, and most menacingly, Get Carter. The son of a charwoman and fish market porter, South London raised Caine actually got his big break by putting on a posh accent in Zulu.
Rather you asked first, old boy.
Caine lit up the screen playing men who had the wit and mettle to climb the institutional ladder, but whose Cockney accent kept them out of such lofty spaces.
Ruby, we've no time to waste here. Oh, it won't take a tick, sir. We've got a fast film in today.
So they put those wits to other uses. The 1960s is generally seen as a time of prosperity for Britain. Low unemployment rates and the end of mandatory national service meant that a greater number of young men had the luxury of free time and a disposable income. Communities were forged on the floors of nightclubs and allegiances pledged via sartorial flair.
Do you like being a mod? Yeah, it's the greatest, isn't it?
Unfortunately, the optimism of the 60s post-war boom soon soured into 70s austerity. The decade was plagued by recession, an oil crisis, labour union disputes and the further collapse of industries. The British economy suffered, and when an economy suffers, who bears the brunt of it? The kitchen sink drama evolved into social realism. Released in 1979 and starring then newcomer Ray Winstone, Scum is an uncompromising depiction of life inside Borstal. Initially filmed for the BBC's Play for Today series in 1977, it was declared too violent for broadcast before director Alan Clark managed to remake it as a feature film.
Right bench, you bastard! I'm the daddy now. Next time I'll kill you!
Ray Winstone had working class credibility. Born in Hackney, he was inspired to become an actor after seeing Saturday Night and Sunday Morning.
Finney in this is a young man, but he's so intense and he's so horrible at times, you know. He was like the anti-hero You loved him. You knew what he was fighting against, about getting out there into the world. Why have I got to be stuck here all the time? And
In Scum, he's terrifying, but never less than captivating as Carlin, a violent, charismatic prison daddy who takes on all comers. As a portrayal of the darker side of working class men, it's unforgettable.
Cut that out, Davis, or I'll give you something to cry about, you mardy little toe rag.
Scum was released just a few months after Margaret Thatcher was elected as Prime Minister. Britain was changing, and screen depictions of working class men reflected this. Thatcher started dismantling unions, public services and industries which supported working class communities. Mass unemployment and strikes followed. Mike Leigh's 1983 film Meantime showed the despair of life for men without purpose. Phil Daniels and a young Tim Roth star as two brothers on the dole in the East End, while Gary Oldman even turns up as a reckless skinhead. It wasn't all doom and gloom though. Channel 4 launched in 1982, and being publicly owned but privately funded meant it could experiment and highlight areas of working class life that hadn't been seen before. Isaac Julian's drama Young Soul Rebels follows two best friends in London at the time of the 1977 Queen's Silver Jubilee celebrations. The lads dealt with police brutality, queer identity and artistic ambition. Serious topics, sure, but the film shows the joy of being young, creative and full of life too.
There's association.
With the end of Thatcherism, the 90s were an exciting time for new talent who were bringing a wider range of working class experiences to the screen. Meanwhile, more established directors like Ken Loach, who began his career in the 1960s, came back to the fore. But as the millennium dawned, a shift was on the horizon, and British cinema saw a notable change. After nearly 2 decades of Tory dominance, New Labour promised a new Britain at their 1997 election win. Great Britain had become cool Britannia, Britpop ruled the airwaves, and London had become the multicultural centre of the world. Being working class even gained some cultural cachet. Britpop stars like Oasis wore their working class roots with pride, and even referred to the imagery and language of the kitchen sink films in their music. Oasis chief songwriter and loudmouth Noel Gallagher even ended up in 10 Downing Street at the invitation of Tony Blair. But placing hope in the establishment seemed foolish. By 1999, Gallagher had changed his tune, saying, "Nothing really changes, does it? Same shit, different day. What was it? We're all middle class now. I find that really insulting. Being middle class is just one step closer to topping yourself, if you ask me. It's just the most boring thing I could ever imagine." Soon, the economic and social drive was replaced with something a little more nihilistic and a lot more fun.
You know what I mean, yeah?
Enter Danny Dyer. Born and raised in Custom House, East London, Dyer arrived on British TV as a baby-faced teen who sounded like he smoked 20 Benson a day. His role as boisterous raver Moth in Human Traffic made him an instant cult hero among the clubbers who saw themselves in his up-for-it screen persona. The film focuses on a bunch of 20-somethings whose connections were formed on the dance floor and whose bond was sealed not by work or school, but with chemicals. After Human Traffic, Dyer started working with director Nick Love and began a collaboration that lasted for 4 films. In these films, girls, money, drugs, drinking and violence are often the only means to escape a life of drudgery, boredom and dead ends.
Did someone order a because one's just showed up?
But it's these films, with the ribald jokes and coarse language, that cemented Dyer as the star he remains 20 years later. None more so than The Football Factory.
There's nothing different about me. I'm just another bored Mal approaching 30 in a dead-end job who lives for the weekend.
The film focuses on the lives and conflicts of a Chelsea hooligan firm whose days revolve around knitting and crochet. Nah, just joking, it's booze, drugs and violence. The trouble is, Dyer, starring as Tommy, finds his paranoia and substance abuse causes troubling nightmares that make him question his life choices. These characters perform a type of masculinity characterised by football hooliganism, a subculture revolving around extending football rivalries into violence off the pitch. The film draws parallels between the sense of belonging the young men feel to their football firms and the camaraderie Tommy's granddad Bill and his best mate Albert have felt having fought together during the war. The difference is, the old men did their battles in a field in France, not on the terraces. Throughout the film, nostalgia for conditions which produced men like Bill and Albert is constantly evoked, but Bill spells out the foolishness in having nostalgia for an imagined past.
Harris thinks we're connected because I fought in the war. What he doesn't understand is I fought to stop people like him with their fascist opinions.
The film's success cemented Dyer's place as a working-class hero, but not the stoic, noble kind that would probably make him more palatable to middle-class critics. Dyer's filmography is full of films and documentaries which put the more toxic aspects of masculinity front and centre, dealing with them head-on. But he's also used his platform to give a voice to working-class people, taking aim at powerful political figures.
We must learn now that the people who went to Eton can't run this country.
And calling out hypocrisy.
So what's happened to that David Cameron who called it on? Let's be fair.
I think you're referring to our former Prime Minister.
Where is the geezer?
Aside from some of the advances made by the advent of Channel 4, the majority of films produced about the experience of British working class men have been overwhelmingly white. But now and again, a film, star or both comes along that turns things on its head. Attack the Block, a 2011 action comedy set on a council estate in South London, offered something new for screen portrayals of working class men. It's a sci-fi romp where a local gang of youths must protect their estate from, yep, an alien invasion. Moses, played by John Boyega, may be a young street thug at the start of the film, but by the end, he's a hero. A teenager showing bravery, loyalty, and eventually selflessness, Moses is a tough and at times heartless criminal, but he cares about his friends, family, and neighbourhood, and is shown to be more than capable of change. Whatever happened to the man who played Moses? Last we heard, Peckham's John Boyega ended up in a galaxy far, far away. Much more recently, Pretty Red Dress took the idea of working class masculinity intersectional in a surprising and bold film set in Northern. To give too much of the plot away would spoil things, but the fact the film is mentioned on this look at working class masculinity and is called Pretty Red Dress suggests where things might lead. At this point, it would be great to say that we've solved all the issues of prejudice and there's a wider range of voices bringing working class stories to the big screen. But that's even more unlikely than the events of Attack the Block. That said, there is a small, dedicated group of British directors who continue to examine what it is to be a working class man in modern Britain. Shane Meadows' This Is England series, which examines Thatcher-era racial and economic politics in a working class community, has a cult-like following. Writer-director Charlotte Reagan has talked openly about trying to move away from the joylessness of social realism. She chooses instead to focus on a young father's attempt to reconnect with his estranged daughter in her brilliant debut feature, Scrapper.
We always spoke about like making a working class film that was like full of joy and where like people kind of weren't defined by their class or the hardships of their class, and it was just like characters that were allowed to exist in their own joyful world.
There's also filmmakers such as Gerard Johnson, Clio Barnard and Philip Barantini, putting working class men at the forefront. While every year, new up-and-coming filmmakers are re-examining the working class experience. We've come a long way from the kitchen sink.